How are you seeing this industry going? Because my pet peeve is in the financial world. I mean, obviously, like Visa, MasterCard, they take such a cut, but like even payment structures, like, money wise for those that kind of are just going and collecting it, but like PayPal, take anything from 5 to 10%. And I mean, most of the time, where it's going, to Asia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, stuff like that, that's a lot of money for them when you're taking that kind of percentage. Have you seen anything, or is there hope? That well, like I know there's talk about XRP and everything, but can you see anything that can change that?
Well, it's interesting because I was talking to a bank yesterday and I was talking with about them about two or three portfolio companies. And I was walking through this idea of, hey, we should be using general ledgers to move money from one place to another. And the guy's looking at me and he's like, you know what you're describing? I said, I know exactly what I'm describing. I'm describing a blockchain network with an immutable ledger. And he's like, I don't know if we're ready for that. And I said, that's why I'm not describing that. I'm describing how it should work. If you want to interpret it as a blockchain, then yes. But the reality is that the movement of money still has to get disrupted because, like, I'll predict that in 5 years, the reality is that the FX desk will no longer exist. Like the buying of currency will no longer exist because you should be able to trade specifically US dollars to Irish, or euros without an FX rate. But the reality is there's still so much infrastructure in financial services that it's, to innovate. And I'll tell you, when I bootstrapped my company, I was doing some work at a bank and they wanted to take a project where they built a platform and simple, just like on the screen, take data. The world's financial data was passing through this financial services company. And they were, and so that how this is just like 15 years ago. And it's still going on today. They were taking data, and I'll use this good example. They were putting it on a USB key. They were taking it, they were running a floor above. An analyst would then crunch that data. If they got an error, they would run it back down. This was a sneaker net. And I was like, this is like 2012. Like, this should not be the case. Like, we should have Excel, spreadsheets and this should go into a database. And even further on, post my startup, I was an entrepreneur in residence at one of the largest insurance companies. They still weren't seeing data in a database. They were still seeing the world's financial data in a daily basis on paper. So before we even get to a blockchain or stable coins or tokenization, there still has to be a modernization of infrastructure. And so that's what's taking so long for the adoption, because when you look at the advent of stable coins, and especially with decentralized finance, where, if you look at 10 years ago, you couldn't build a fintech. Now you can go and buy all these pieces of the puzzle, build your own bank without any issues because you have all the infrastructure. And that's the hardest thing, is just the adoption of it.